Well, good morning. My name is Dirk Webb with the St. Cloud Chamber of Commerce, and we want to welcome you to the Toolkit for April 22nd, 2025. This morning, we have a very timely topic and a very timely person to do the topic, cybersecurity, what lurks in your data closet. First of all, as we welcome you, we also want to thank our sponsors, the City of St. Cloud, Osceola County, OUC, the Reliable One, Oscar, the Osceola County Realtors, and Toho Water Authority. We invite you to make sure that the Toolkit is part of your monthly business training calendar and remind you that on May 13th, Nathan Steiner, a Chamber Board member and owner of Anchor Online Web Design, will be discussing 5 things your website should have. And so we're looking forward to that as well. But this morning, we've got Joe Reilly with us. Joe is our Chamber Board Chair for 2024-2025, and he is also the Director of Operational Technology for OUC. This is the right man to discuss this, and it's a very important topic. So Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you and tell us what lurks in our data closet.
Sounds good, Dirk. So first and foremost, don't be afraid to stop and ask questions. The cybersecurity industry is heavy in acronyms. So if I say something you haven't heard of, please stop and ask. So first, this is me right here. Just my background. I went to UCF. I've got a bachelor's in electrical, master's in industrial. I have multiple cybersecurity certifications just because of the industry I work in. And, I always said, I was a bad student in high school. I used to say D for done. So I joined the Army at 17. And why I did that, for a fun fact, I Christmas treed my SAT because who wants to take a test on Saturday when you're 16? Anyway, yeah, used my GI Bill to go to college, and my favorite movie is Star Wars just to round out the nerd requirements. So there you go. All right. So what about you? So let me find things about you. There's a thing we call open source intelligence, OSINT. So let's talk about that real quick because this is you. I'm going to introduce yourself to yourself. When you put things on your car, so looking at the car and the stickers, what can I tell? Your child Billy plays baseball in St. Cloud. His number's 33. So I can go to Google and find his team picture somewhere. Pretty sure I can, Okay, so now I also know your spouse works out of town. Look, he's works in an oil field or something like that. You have a little dog. The dog's name is Max. Okay, great. Now I know you have a little dog. You like dirt bikes, so you have expensive dirt bikes in your house. So now, as a bad actor, we know when to visit your house and steal items because you know what? Your St. Cloud baseball team just posted online that they're having an away game, and your son has posted that they're going. And we know people are out of town. So, prime example of how you can overshare just with stickers on your car. And people don't realize you can Google all that information and start connecting the dots. And if they don't think there's people out there who don't do that, you're wrong. They do. People always wonder why Facebook accounts are a target for hackers. Well, on Facebook, people share vacations, their pet names, along with family names. And if you're a bad actor and you want to hack someone's accounts, guess what? Facebook gives them all the security questions answered in one place. What's your pet's name? What's your mother's maiden name? I guarantee Facebook is linked at all. So there you go on the bumper stickers. I love that. All right. So why does cybersecurity matter for small business? Common myths, I'm too small to be a target. I want to talk about Target. Back in 2013, Target had Fazio Mechanical Services. They were a maintenance company. Now, let me explain. Target's a really large company. They have people who maintain air conditioners, electrical, cleaning, industrial cleaning. So what Target did was they have a centralized work order system, and any vendors they had would have to log in to their work order system to get the daily, if this store manager created a ticket, the electrical guys would log in and be able to see the ticket and be able to service that store, etc. Well, what Target didn't do was they didn't vet their vendors, and the vendors were compromised. So Fazio Mechanical Services ended up getting compromised, and that allowed the bad actor to get into Target's system, Target's infrastructure. which eventually led to the loss of 40 million credit card and debit card numbers. So the point being is indirect vendors can cause vulnerability to your system. Another event that occurred was Georgia Neurological Clinic. They're a small healthcare provider. Cyber criminals installed malware through phishing emails. They had obtained thousands of patient records. So costly legal fees and loss of reputation. It's big. There was past tense, a Colorado-based promotional products business that manufactured, cups and koozies and things like that. They had a cyber attack that damaged all their infrastructure to the point it put them out of business. They couldn't recover from it. So most attacks are for money or to steal personally identifiable information to be sold on the dark web. And there are groups out there that actually pay for ransomware as a service, and they'll split the proceeds with the people who engage them. There have been system administrators of companies who've been approached and offered a percentage cut if they allow a bad actor to compromise their system. So the guy you entrusted with your network credentials may be at risk of being compromised. There was one big event I'll talk about that I'm not putting on the screen here. In Germany, Germany makes a lot of what they call high-end boutique steel. And that kind of stainless steel is like used in surgical industry. It's stuff that China and Russia cannot manufacture. They don't have the not the technology. They didn't invest the research into it, and Germany has. So a certain foreign country wanted to steal that knowledge, so they hacked into this German steel company to see how their process worked. So basically, they want to see, how long is the steel at a certain temperature, how long is it cooled, how long is it reheated, what chemicals or minerals are being inserted into the process, and when. Unfortunately, they disabled some safety of life systems along the way, actually causing molten steel to be poured onto the floor, injuring numerous workers. So, and just another interesting fact, bad actors love to attack OUC during hurricanes. They're assuming we're distracted. So when hurricanes are occurring, you wouldn't believe how many intrusion attempts we get on OUC system because they think we're looking the other way. But this just tells you how active the industry is. So why do they want your information? So this is from the dark web. This is the value of a credit card, $10 to $50. Price depends, of course, on the balance. Credit card, when they say the word fulls, meaning full information, that is the actual term they use on the dark web, fulls. Name, address, social security, date of birth, the full identity profile. They can get $30 to $150. Premium or high credit card limits, 100 to 500 or higher. So this is why they're after your information. This is what they get when they sell your information. But my next slide, I love this slide because what it shows is our social security numbers now have been leaked to the point that the value has now dropped. A social security number only gets you $1 to $5. So think about that. Everyone's social security numbers must be out there already. A social security with a full profile, they can get $20 to $100. And of course, they can use that for loans, tax fraud, etc. So yes, the bad actors are out there selling your information. Okay, so what does that lead to? Let's talk about the security onion. So this is what everyone should be doing. I'm not saying in this particular, each particular item. It basically, security onion, we call it an onion because it's layered defense. You peel back the onion, you peel back the layers. You have a physical layer where basically you want to make sure your assets can't just be stolen and walk out the door. You have perimeter protection, procedural, network, antivirus. So it's a layered approach to defending your infrastructure. And I always say it doesn't mean you have to meet every layer of security, but rather how your security should be layered. So first is physical. Where do you keep your servers and computers? Do you travel with laptops? That information could be stolen if you don't encrypt the hard drive. Overall, as you can see at the very bottom, user training is at your core because the biggest threat to every company is the internal user inadvertently clicking a link, answering the phone to a scammer, and or giving out information that could compromise your systems and your business. So if you want to know where the weakest link is, it always is the people side, not the technology, unfortunately. So the type of threats that are out there. You have phishing. That's the most common one, and I think everyone here has probably received a phishing email where they're trying to get information from you. They're trying to get you to click a link. You have ransomware, where once they get in, they try to lock up all your files and demand payment. of which I think the number right now is only 40% are actually successful at getting their data back, even after paying. Malware is just that. It's malicious. It's stuff that goes into your computer just to do damage and destruction. Of course, then lastly, there's the insider threats. You could have an employee angered over a denied raise. They copy your client list, sell it to competitor, then delete the important project files they were working on. There's people who do the scorched earth. It does happen. So most cybersecurity breaches usually originate from opening attachments or clicking a link. And so I can tell you at work, they test that. And the fun one that always gets a lot of people is the moment an email comes out that says free lunch, click here. You would not believe how many people click that link. I can't tell you. Just put the word free lunch in there and you'll get every government worker known to mankind to click that link. Another area that gets hit is our attorneys. Now, because of public records requirements, open, requests, any request that comes in and says it's a public record request, the attorneys have to, and they're obligated to open that link to make sure it's not a public records request. So our attorneys inadvertently open things, but they've now established them a separate computer just for opening those links to, ensure they meet their Florida Statute 119 public records requirements. So it's just another example of how the bad actors exploit all of our requirements. So what are the common vectors? Well, email, weak passwords, unpatched software, public Wi-Fi. These are common vectors for bad actors to get in. Phishing and ransomware, of course, come via email. Unpatched software, what that does, that allows for known vulnerabilities to expose your network of computers because the bad actors know there's a vulnerability out there and they try to exploit it. Weak passwords. What was interesting about weak passwords is, believe it or not, bad actors can go and guess or use what they call rainbow tables, the most common passwords, like the word password. We actually had a person at work. His password was password, and IT couldn't believe it. They're like, really? Come on, can't you change your passwords? Another thing I always make sure is a lot of people, when they put stuff in, they never change the default passwords. And a lot of people on their cameras, their Ring doorbells, baby monitoring devices, they leave the default passwords in. And unfortunately, they don't have any security infrastructure in place. So you know what? Bad actors get in there and they exploit these known default passwords. You can go Google any device you own and you can see on the web what the default password is. It's out there. So it's easy to find. Public Wi-Fi. The thing about public open Wi-Fi networks, it allows your computer to be seen by others on the same network. So, and if your network sharing is turned on the laptop, it could allow an unauthorized user to view and copy files right off your laptop. So, the other thing is people have visitors come to their office, and if you let the visitor use your internal network Wi-Fi, well, guess what? They're on your network. And if you're not segmented away from that, that person may be able to see what's on your system and files. Even employee phones, you have to ask the question, should they be on your critical network or should they be on the guest network? You have no way of verifying if you can trust that device. And, you don't want guests basically traversing your company networks. You just want to basically give them internet access, send them straight out the internet so they don't see your company internal network information. That's the reason of creating guest accounts on Wi-Fi. All right. So top cyber security risks for small business. Lack of awareness and training. That's the biggest one. Poor password practices, outdated software, unsecure remote work setups. Some people, use AnyViewer or TeamViewer, and they leave it open. They don't put, encryption in, and then the employees are accessing that way. Well, that actually happened to a water utility in Tampa. They were allowing their engineering support services to access via TeamViewer, and they left it with a very weak password. And a bad actor got in and was able to take control of a water plant because they allowed remote access with very little security and a very weak password. So, and of course, data loss, no backups or recovery plan. I want to talk about that. So in the cybersecurity world, they say it's not your ability to defend against a cyber attack, but your ability to recover. Resiliency is just as important as basic defense. So the two top items on this list are training and recovery. So you always have to have both of those in mind when you're setting up your systems. And lastly, of course, patching the system is a leader in there too. So the thing to look at is, there's a lot of people out there still using Windows 7. Windows 7 isn't supported anymore. I can tell you, we were at a meeting, an industrial control systems meeting, and there is a major theme park that's still using Windows 98 to control some of their shows. And it's not a ride, it's just a show. And they actually still are using 3.5 floppy disks to move the data around on that system, because it's a show. And they said eventually when they update that section of the park, they'll replace it. But it's just an example of how even in the very large companies, they're still supporting very outdated systems. So what I'm trying to get at, don't feel alone. All right, so some essential security practices. We always look at strong password hygiene, use of, you should be using either password managers or have some standards in place for that. A lot of companies now are moving to 12-character passwords. I find it really hard to remember 12-character passwords. Thus the reason I use a password manager now. That's rough. MFA is multi-factor authentication. Those are things you should always try to implement to help secure yourself. Look at secure devices and networks. Patch regularly. You look at safe email and web use. And of course, as I said before, backups and recovery. So part of the layered defense, you should implement the following. A lot of people don't realize the second Tuesday of every month, Microsoft releases critical patches. You should patch as soon as possible, since the bad actors see the vulnerabilities based on this patch Tuesday. And within 24 hours, they start weaponizing the known vulnerability. So what that's saying is when Microsoft says, hey, we have a critical patch, well, guess what? The bad actors saw that too. And in 24 hours, they're going to try to look to exploit it. So in the perfect world, you should patch right away, or at least by the end of that week, Microsoft released it. A lot of medium-sized companies will try to patch once a month because there's so much to patch. And no company should probably go longer than a quarter to implement patching. So, you should be looking at that as in your company as something you should do regularly and have some kind of cadence on your systems. Anyway, so I always joke about my favorite password manager is the sticky note under the keyboard. And yes, people still do that. So if you do that, that means your entire cybersecurity program depends on physical security. So as long as nobody breaks in, your passwords are safe. Unless you have a disgruntled employee, so that's always fun. Anyway, another thing to watch out for is shared user accounts. I've seen that where a lot of people use a common software like QuickBooks, and they'll only have one login, and 3 people are using it with the same username and password. The problem is, if anything ever happened, it'd be very difficult for someone to come in and audit the logs to see who was logged in and determine what happened, because it's all the same username and password. So if if there's 3 people in there and one of them just is disgruntled, you'll never figure out which one was disgruntled because everyone used the same password. So I always say, whenever possible, don't use shared user accounts. So here's some employee training and policies. I have some links in here, and Dirk, I'll send this presentation to you after so you can they can copy the links if needed. OUC uses the Know Before tool. It's a paid tool. And what it does is they test phishing campaigns to see how many of your team clicks the link. It helps you identify who may need training in your organization and to assess your organization's overall understanding of cybersecurity. Along with training, along with these training classes, which some are free, you also need to establish a clear, acceptable use policy. And what that is you need to convey to your team and your staff what is acceptable use on the network. How should they be allowed to use the computer and the network? Do you want to allow streaming, gaming, personal social media, gambling, and even pornography? That occurs in a lot of businesses unbeknownst to the business owners. So establishing acceptable use policy first and foremost tells this team what is the expectations. And then you can implement controls around that, of course. But you have to put that out there first, because a lot of people assume everyone has the same value system as you, and they don't. But I want to point out that a lot of these, gambling sites and some unscrupulous streaming sites are filled with malware. And believe it or not, you could be exposing your network to these bad actors because you're allowing people to go to these, sketchy websites. So, and then finally is role-based access control. You want to make sure appropriate access is given based on their job. I always call it, along the lines of separation of duties. They used to always say in the accounting world, the person who writes the checks shouldn't deposit the checks. And even in the computer world, you should have similar controls. And, basically, if someone's working on the accounting system and they're an accountant, they shouldn't have access to your marketing system. They don't need it. So you don't want to give everyone carte blanche access to the entire network, because it's easier that way. You do need to segment things and the controls. And part of that is also to limit your exposure, because if the accounting group does, someone over there exposes something that only affects the accounting software, it doesn't affect the marketing software, and vice versa. And it's more likely the marketing group will get you in trouble than the accounting group. Anyway, that's what we've seen, because the marketing group is always working a lot faster and harder on the internet than accounting is. So they tend to expose themselves to more. And we've seen that at OUC too. A lot of pictures coming back and forth, and encrypted, not encrypted files, but some of the files are actually poisoned files. They've actually had that happen. They got a PDF file that was poisoned, and it caused a malware actually it was a ransomware attack to occur. But it was because, they were trying to manipulate files. The person they were working with, the third party they were working with, was actually compromised, and the file came in and compromised the marketing group. All right. Oh, and lastly, one person should not have the keys to the entire kingdom without sort of some checks and balances. What I mean by that is, if you have IT administration going on, make sure someone else is also keeping the username and passwords in their files too, so that if something happens to that person, if they end up, winning the lottery and disappearing to Europe or something, you want to make sure you still have your own access control and ability to, change your network configurations and computers, etc. All right, so right into working with third parties. This is a real challenge for a lot of companies. You need third-party support. You ask what kind of access do you need, what kind of file sharing. And here's a big one. Remember what happened to Target? That was their vendor. The vendor's weak security controls allowed access to the Target network. And if you need to allow vendors access to your network infrastructure, think about what they need to access. Do they need to access files? That's a big one. Another thing that occurred to a hospital, let's talk about offshoring data. This one hospital that I know of, this was a case study. They had a policy in their legal documents, you weren't allowed to offshore their data. So they needed to do a data migration, and they hired this company to migrate their databases. So of course, all their data had to be sent to this vendor. Well, the vendor turned around and hired a person in India to assist with the data migration, because in India, the labor rates are cheaper, and there's a lot of IT professional support coming out of India. So the person in India now has your data, because now they're working on it. You see, now here's where you have to make sure any contracts you write say your data doesn't leave the country, including their subcontractors. So the subcontractor was in India, and the contractor they hired didn't pay the person in India. So the person in India sent an email to the hospital and said, I haven't been paid. And if you don't pay me, I'm going to release all this information to the public that you guys, don't want released. So basically extorted the hospital into paying them, almost like ransomware. But the problem was there was going to be reputation damage. So the point being is the reason you don't want to offshore data is you got to remember, U.S. laws don't apply to foreign countries. And once your data is gone and off the U.S. shores, you've lost it forever. You have no control of it, and there's nothing you can do to get it back. So it's always a consideration when working with vendors and contractors. So another challenge that comes across is compliance and legal basics. A lot of people don't realize this, but around 2014, remember, target breach was 2013. So the US legislature got together, and in 2014, they said, hey, we're going to create the Florida Information Protection Act. So what that says is if you have a data breach, and you have 500 or more of your customers' data has made it out of your network, and it has 2 or more personally identifiable information in that. So like an address and a name would be 2 levels of PII, personally identifiable information. And you lost 600 people's customer accounts, you would be by law in the state of Florida required to report that to the Florida Department of Legal Affairs that you had a breach. And what does that mean? It means most of the time they're going to tell you, they're going to come back to you and say, well, offer free credit monitoring services, right? That's what you're going to be on the hook for, but your reputation will never recover from that. So you have to remember that, reputation damage is going to be big because people are like, hey, you lost all my information and now it's out there. Thanks a lot. And it opens you to lawsuits. So, but hey, here's the good news. They also passed HB 473, which is the Safe Harbor Act. And what that is, it says, hey, if the company that was breached adopted a cybersecurity program that aligns with National Institute of Standard Technology or HIPAA or some applicable state or federal law, you might be protected and not have to be fined by the state of Florida up to, I think they also define as what, $1,000 a day if you don't report it after a certain amount of time. Anyway. But the cost to establish a NIST level cybersecurity program may be out of reach for a lot of small businesses. So, but I just want to let you know, HB 473 is out there to help you. But actually, I think it only helps the big companies because most people can't get to the level of NIST requirements. I've seen the NIST requirements; they're quite onerous. So, all right. So, creating a cybersecurity plan. The big thing is, what do you own? A lot of people don't realize what they own. They don't realize what's on their network. I can tell you, printers, a lot of people have printers on their network, and sometimes they don't even realize they have streaming devices like Roku or appliances, believe it or not. I've seen a lot of appliances now connecting to the internet, and they're going right through your network. There was a case where there was a bad actor using refrigerators. And the refrigerators I'm talking about? This is interesting. This is why I'm talking about identifying assets that are on your network. This is not easy. The refrigerator connected to the internet. And this is one of the refrigerators where you had the touch screen. And if you were short on something, on milk or something, you would just tap order milk, order this, order that. Well, the computer inside that refrigerator is able to send emails. And they have, you can set up in there, hey, send me an alert when the milk is low, or send me an alert when the temperature goes too low in the refrigerator and I'm about to lose stuff in there, the freezer's not working. Well, a bad actor was able to hack into a lot of these refrigerators, and they used the refrigerators to send phishing emails. As crazy as that is, but what that does is that allows the bad actor to hide. You can't tell where the email came from. It came from like 10 or 20 different refrigerators. So, yeah, I was just thinking a bad joke. Is your refrigerator running? Anyway, you better go catch it, right? So is your refrigerator emailing you? I don't know. But it did happen. And a bunch of refrigerators were compromised because once again, they connected the refrigerator to the network wide open to the internet and never changed the passwords and left it all default. So the bad actors were able to get in and, basically use the refrigerator for their emailing schemes. Quite entertaining. Anyway. So anyway, you need to know what assets you have, especially those accessing the internet. You need to identify what's important. So you got to set priorities. What business processes are most important to you? For example, like accountants, what's important to them is their customer social security numbers and tax return data. You know, and you have to ask, where is this data at? What is the priority? And that also ties into what you should back up, you know, and as you replace, and then you also need to assign resources to perform the tasks and keep that plan updated. So the plan being, you need to set your priorities, you need to assign responsibilities, and then you need to, you know, keep the plan going on what that is. So assign resources, and lastly, keep it updated. As you replace computers and technology, don't forget to go back and update your plan. Things to consider on your data backup plan is, how far do you want to go store data? You know, this is a question that always comes up at work. Do we want to hold data, you know, our backup storage data for 3 months, 6 months? And how much are you backing up? Are you storing it offsite or onsite? You know, ask yourself a question that a lot of people don't think about. What if you had a fire in your office? Where's your data at? You know, what is your business continuity plan? Because cybersecurity all ties into your business continuity plan, but you need to make sure this is all established somewhere and updated regularly. And a lot of companies are really bad about doing that, because, you know, if you know, let's say Tom Smith was assigned to do the backups, and, you know, Tom retires, everyone forgets Tom was doing the backups, and then the backups stop. I can tell you, years ago, when I was in college, I was working for part-time for this computer support company, and they had a customer who did home health care. And back then they used to use what they call DAT tapes, and Dirk probably remembers DAT tapes, but they were these little tape drives, and people would back up everything. And what happened was, my coworker went in and they had a hard drive failure. Oh, that's no problem. We're just going to recover from the DAT tapes. Well, guess what? None of the DAT tapes worked. No one ever checked that it was actually recording correctly. They were recording at night, thought it was working, but they never tested one of the backups to see that the data was actually there. So they had 90 days of data. But what happened was, it was broken for over 6 months. So they kept erasing the old data when they kept trying to put in the tapes every day. And so basically the system messed up. The DAT tape writer was just writing nothing to the tape. So the point being is, it's great that you do backups, but the moral of the story is, they're worthless until you test it. And you have to make sure you can at least restore one file. And you should do that regularly. That should be part of your plan. You know, if Tom Smith leaves and he was doing the backups, someone else should be testing the restore. But let's say it's Tom, but then he leaves, no one's doing the backups anymore, or no one's testing the backups. But I can tell you, that was actually so detrimental to that home healthcare business that they had to go back to paper and reestablish their entire client list. And it was catastrophic for them. It took them, I think, 6 to 8 months to recover from it. And luckily, this was in the 90s when people still had paper. Today, no one prints anything out anymore. And just think about that for yourself. If you were to lose your data, what does that look like for you? You know, so people just don't think about that, because we get so comfortable with the technology and its reliability that the thought of something catastrophic is far from your mind. So that's the moral of the story. You know, identify your assets, know what's important, set your priorities, assign responsibilities. That's really, really important. Make sure someone's doing their backups and the restores, and then keep it updated, because it's easy to lose track of that. So another big question I get asked a lot is budget. And I want to say that budget is very subjective, very subjective. You know, usually, you know, an employee, you're looking at $8,000 to $2,000 per employee, a new employee, that is. You're going to buy a computer, you know, you're going to buy a computer, you're going to buy a monitor, all the associated software. You know, and what if you're doing design work, engineering or development work, that computer has to have a bigger processor. And trust me, now you're closer to the $2,000 range when you need heavier processing power. Another thing to always look at is you should be budgeting your replacement cycle. You should be looking at every 3 to 5 years to replace your technology. And then, of course, you should have a budget for cybersecurity on top of that. So that's usually 5 to 20% of your total budget is what it usually runs, depending on it. So like I said, it's very subjective. some people want maximum security, some people want optimal security, and some people want minimum security. The question is, what is your risk appetite? The other question is, what about technology obsolescence? I've always said, going back to the replacing every 3 to 5 years. After 5 years, the probability of hardware failures increase significantly. So keep that in mind. Also, there's a saying, Gordon Moore, probably Dirk remembers this. Gordon Moore was the founder of Intel. And there was a thing they created he created Moore's Law. And he said, roughly every 2 years, technology doubles and the price gets cut in half. In other words, we are getting more processing power in a single chip, and the cost to produce that technology keeps going down. So, an example I have of that is, I remember when memory chips averaged about $30 per megabyte, and now it's like $30 for 16 gigabytes. So you can right there see just that alone that you're getting a lot more for your money. But the bottom line is, depending on the criticality of your system, should determine your life cycle replacement. So if you had, let's say you had a server, and that's where you store all your data, and that is your critical piece of equipment for your company, maybe you should really replace it at the 5-year mark, because the probability of a hardware failure going up is occurring, and you don't want to take that risk. But it all depends on your risk appetite. If you're storing everything in the cloud, then you don't care so much. Then then you're paying for a cloud service, and then you just want to make sure your technology is staying up to date, and maybe you can go 7 years. But 5 years, I've noticed, seems to be about the limit for a lot of devices. I noticed that they start slowing down because newer software comes out that is more intensive. They want more processing power. It seems like every time I do a software update on Quicken, my computer gets slower. And it's not so much that. I think Quicken's getting more onerous and my computer's getting older. So you'll notice that as time goes on. So here's some rough estimates for cybersecurity costs, monthly budget range. As you can see, everyone should have some form of antivirus protection on their computer, also known as endpoint protection. You may or may not want a firewall to segment your internal network from the internet. You may want to pay for multi-factor authentication and password management. You definitely want to look at backup and disaster recovery, some kind of solution, whether it's cloud-based or locally hosted. You might want to look and invest in cybersecurity training for your team. And I'll talk about cyber insurance here, but let me start with, so an example like FortiGate firewalls, they run about $1,000 a year just for the subscription to keep it updated and monitoring. The cybersecurity insurance, I have a lot of mixed emotions on that because I've not seen one person ever collect after an event, a cybersecurity event, because the insurance companies find a way to say, well, you didn't do enough of X, you didn't do enough of Y, you didn't do enough of Z, and that creates, an opportunity to deny the claim. So, I haven't seen anyone pay out, but but some people buy it because if they have a, hypothetically, let's say you have an underwriter or a customer that mandates, let's say you're doing, I don't know, you're doing financial investing, and the company you go through for financial investing, part of that franchise requires you to have cyber insurance. Okay, that makes sense. But I would not buy personally cyber insurance. I would rather take that money invested in my backup recovery systems and my own resiliency, because I haven't seen anyone get pay out yet on that. So that's just an observation. So, all right. And with that, I'll stop.
That was great information, Joe. I do have a question.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on Mac products versus PCs? I have my opinion. I want to hear a professional's.
Well, what I've seen is, okay, so the Mac products, okay, from a technology standpoint, they have a lot more processing power than the PCs. If you're into the audio visual world or graphic manipulations Video rendering, the Mac is a leader because their processors are much better at doing that. From an industry perspective, the Macs seem to be more of a niche, and even in a corporate environment. Microsoft licensing and PCs have dominated the corporate environment because there's a lot more software out there in the business world for the PC side. So from a cybersecurity side, interestingly enough, it used to be no one was attacking the Macs, but now they're in scope and they're getting hacked also. So they're fair game now, because for years the Mac OS, the bad actors weren't going after, but now they are. So I like the Macs, but they are they seem to be in the corporate world more in the niche side for people I see using it are more in the graphic arts area, and anyone doing video and editing and things like that.
Yeah, I know everyone in my office has Mac products. So, but we're a very, very small office and we're heavy on marketing. So, yeah, I know in my experience when I had PCs, it seemed like always had issues with viruses, and I, don't go on, those high the websites, that have that high probability of malware or whatever. It just seemed like I was always having issues, and knock on wood, have not had that same experience with Mac products. But yeah, I guess that could also happen. So thanks for that.
Any other questions for Joe? All right, so what you've heard today is some great information, obviously, for both small businesses and large businesses. Now, just because you're a very small business doesn't let you off the hook. I'll give you an example. So the chamber has one set of critical files, and the question we ask is, how crippling to our business would it be if we did not have those files? So one of the things that you can do as a small business is simply invest in 2 jump drives, drop your data onto a jump drive, and here we walk it over to another business and let them store it for us in a secure area. And then we rotate those out periodically on a regular basis. So think about the data that you have that is absolutely critical to you, whether it's Microsoft Excel spreadsheets and then back those up to a jump drive and get those off your premises. And it can be that simple and that cost effective to do that. Am I correct, Joe?
Absolutely. And to add to that, Dirk, if you're using a laptop and you're traveling with your laptop and you leave it in your car, I highly recommend you turn BitLocker onto the operating system, onto the hard drive. So that way it's encrypted. This way they can't just take the hard drive out of the laptop and put it in another one and access all your files. So, things to think about. If, along with backup and storage, if you have anything that's portable, leaving the office, make sure you secure it. And the backup thing is so critical. Putting it off site I can't say enough good things about moving that data off your property, in the event of, a catastrophic flood or fire. And to add to that, Dirk, I went to one place years ago and their server was inside of a closet. And inside this small office, inside that closet was a hot water heater for the sink. And I was like, I don't think this server should be here. And they're like, why? I said, you don't put it, you're right next to a hot water heater. And they said, yeah, we'll move it. So I helped them move the server to a table in a different spot. And guess what? The next week, the water heater actually started leaking and saturated the entire closet, sprayed water all over the place. And I'm like, okay, that was a near miss. But another example of, I'm glad they didn't have to execute their disaster recovery plan. But it's a prime example of how even a water heater leak could, impact your business.
Well, what a great topic and great delivery, great information for us, Joe. And as Joe mentioned, we'll have the recording of this, and Joe is also going to make his presentation available to us. So I want to thank Joe Reilly of OUC for talking to us today about cybersecurity. And we appreciate you being here today. And we want you to make the toolkit part of your monthly business calendar. May 13th, reminder that Nathan Steiner will be here from Anchor Online Web Design with 5 things your website should have. Thank you,
And
Joe.
Hold on, Lisa has a question.
No, I got,
We'll stop the recording.
yeah, you don't need my